listening to the WrestleHavoc Podcast on YouTube, where we discuss everything in and outside of the squared circle. We talk all that goes on in the realm of WWE and AEW every week. And now, here's your host, the one that will give you a reality check on pro wrestling, Flamin' Ricky DeReyes. This is the WrestleHavoc Podcast.
Forbidden Door is officially in the history books. What is up, everybody? It is Flamin' Ricky DeReyes, right here on the WrestleHavoc Podcast, here to review AEW and New Japan Pro Wrestling's Forbidden Door 2023 pay-per-view. Honestly, man, I am absolutely speechless, and I mean fucking speechless, after this show was over. What a phenomenal show this was. This was by far AEW's best pay-per-view of 2023. You know, I talked about in my Double or Nothing review on how bad the crowd was in Las Vegas. The crowd at the Scotiabank Arena in Toronto, you guys were phenomenal. You guys were fantastic. You guys definitely made this show exactly what it was supposed to be. There was a lot of doubters on the internet. A lot of doubters on the internet whether or not this show was going to be a success or not. Every year, and of course this is the second ever Forbidden Door, and we saw the exact same thing last year with last year's Forbidden Door, which was the very first edition of Forbidden Door. A lot of people, man, a lot of people were doubting the success of this show. They were just talking about how this show is not going to be sold out. This show is just going to be, you know, only catering to the hardcores. But if you want to talk about how successful this show was, according to Sports Illustrated, Forbidden Door 2023, the live gate was $1.2 million. Canadian was $1.6 million, if you count Canadian currency. In North America, it was the biggest number in history for a non-WWE show and the third biggest gate ever in Canada. If you want to talk about how impactful this show was, just watch this show. It goes to show you right there that professional wrestling is alive and well. Excalibur even stated on commentary, this show is a love letter to professional wrestling. And it really was, man. Kenny Omega versus Will Ospreay. Holy fucking shit. I know the term match of the year gets thrown around everywhere, and trust me, it does. I'm guilty of that as well. You know, I talked about Roosh versus Bryan Danielson potentially being the match of the year, but bro, you guys don't understand. 40 minutes, Kenny Omega and Will Ospreay battled in that squared circle. 40 goddamn minutes. And these men gave it their all, man. The storytelling in the ring was top-notch. It was a simple story, but it was an effective story. You know, everybody talks about how there's no story in AEW, but clearly there was story behind this match. And it was a relatively simple story. Did it play out on AEW television like a lot of people wanted it to in the build-up to this match? No. But the story in the ring wrote itself. Will Ospreay was upset that Kenny Omega went to Japan and beat him for the IWGP U.S. title. Will Ospreay is back for revenge. He absolutely hates Canada, and he's coming back for revenge and wanting to take that IWGP United States title from Kenny Omega. And that is exactly what happened. 40 minutes of just an absolute bloodbath, how do I put it into words, man? These two men murdered each other in the ring. Absolutely murdered each other. That is probably the best scenario I could give you for this match. If you want to call this match the best match of 2023, I cannot blame you for thinking that way, because these two men just absolutely gave it their all. As the thumbnail states, Kenny Omega and Will Ospreay delivered an absolute phenomenal spectacle. That's what this match was. It was a spectacle. But I'll talk about that match later on the Forbidden Door review. We had Bryan Danielson, the American Dragon, in the main event, taking on Kazuchika Okada, the Rainmaker of New Japan Pro Wrestling. Was this A great match? Yes, this was a great match. I loved this match. Was it better than Ospreay versus Omega? No, it was not. Honestly, I felt like the finish of this match was kind of a little bit random, but I understood why this match closed the show. This is the first time ever. Bryan Danielson and Okada never touched each other before this match even started until last night. So I understand why this match closed the show. But a lot of people are talking about how Kenny Omega and Will Ospreay should have closed the show. Honestly, I wouldn't mind either way. But if you really think about it, if the roles were reversed and Kenny Omega and Will Ospreay closed the show, it would have probably been in the same predicament as Bryan Danielson and Kazuchika Okada were. Because if you really think about it, Kenny Omega and Will Ospreay, after that match, the crowd was just fucking burnt out after the intensity that we saw in that match. Not to take away from Danielson and Kazuchika Okada, because those men absolutely delivered. But, of course, the big outcome from this match was Danielson making Kazuchika Okada tap out. I believe it was the first time that Kazuchika Okada tapped out from any wrestler since, I believe, 2015. Correct me if I'm wrong. So this is definitely a big, big, big deal. But, of course, when it came to the entrances, Mr. Danielson came out to his classic theme song, and as soon as this theme was on sale, as soon as this song was able to get licensed, man, Tony Khan swooped in so fucking fast and got the rights for a one-time deal for the final countdown by Europe. I don't know about y'all, man, but that entrance made this fucking show. But we're going to be talking about that later on, of course, right here on the AEW and New Japan Pro Wrestling Forbidden Door pay-per-view review. Before I get on with all of this craziness after this amazing show, of course, make sure to like and subscribe to the WrestleHavoc Podcast right here on YouTube, in which we discuss everything in and outside of the squared circle. Make sure to like and subscribe for more content. And, as the freaking referee would say, ring, ring, ring that damn bell for more notifications. Of course, if you guys missed it, the AEW Collision review is up on the channel. I talk about Bullet Club Gold and the Guns taking on CMFTR and Ricky Starks. Overall, it was a phenomenal collision. CM Punk looks so much better in the ring than he did the previous week. And, of course, tonight at Forbidden Door, he wrestled Satoshi Kojima, and, bro, this man played the crowd so well. I'm going to be talking about that later on, but if you guys haven't checked out the AEW Collision review, the link will be in the description below. Also, the SmackDown review is up on the channel. Of course, I talk about a show that offered nothing of importance at all. Could you say we had some build-up for Money in the Bank? I'm going to be honest, man, we didn't really have a lot of build for Money in the Bank. Roman Reigns was not on this show, but it was a show really that was not important at all. The majority of the things that happened on the SmackDown show, to be quite honest with you, were just nothing stuff that you could easily miss. And if you missed anything on SmackDown, you really did not miss anything at all. But if you guys haven't checked out the SmackDown review, the link as well will be in the description below. All right, let's get on to this amazing pay-per-view. Let's get on to AEW and New Japan Forbidden Door 2023. The show kicks off with MJF, the AEW World Champion, taking on Hiroshi Tanahashi for the AEW World Title. Now, everybody talked about Hiroshi Tanahashi being washed, being at his age roughly. I think he's like 47 years old. And it clearly showed in his match against Swerve Strickland. Now, I wasn't really one of those people that kind of like shit all over Tanahashi. I think he worked the best that he could, and Swerve definitely, tried to make him look very good. Hiroshi Tanahashi definitely looked so much better in this match with MJF than he did with Swerve. Swerve worked the match very well, in my opinion, on Collision. But MJF, I always talked about this, in the lead up to this match. I always said MJF will be selling his ass off against Tanahashi. And indeed, MJF 100% sold his ass off and made Hiroshi Tanahashi look like $1 million. He really didn't. Even Hiroshi Tanahashi made MJF look very well in this match. MJF comes out and he comes out with a robe that says New Japan is an indie. Of course, MJF is playing with the gimmick that he absolutely despises New Japan Pro Wrestling. Now, there was a lot of people, a lot of people that were complaining about the fact that this match, which is an AEW World Championship match, opened the show. Now, I could understand that argument if it was any other AEW pay-per-view besides Forbidden Door. And trust me, a lot of people were talking about, oh, you guys are hypocritical because you guys would complain if the WWE title would open up a show. There would be so many instances where Roman Reigns would open up the show and I wouldn't really give a shit. But I can remember complaining that the World Heavyweight title opened Night of Champions. And at first I really didn't like the idea because it is a new title that WWE is going to be establishing, and it's the finals of a tournament, and it clearly shows that this title is a secondary title. But after what WWE did at the end of Night of Champions with Jimmy Uso, of course, super kicking Roman Reigns, now I understood why that match opened the show. But still, this show is called Forbidden Door for a reason. It is a joint show with AEW and New Japan Pro Wrestling. It would not make sense whatsoever for a guy like MJF, who his character is everything that the fans despise of what a wrestler should look like. And honestly, if you think about it, MJF's character, he does not like New Japan whatsoever. And MJF basically stated on Collision, I will be opening the show or else I will not be wrestling on this show. The storyline makes total sense whatsoever. If this was any other AEW pay-per-view, I would be upset. But in this case, when it comes to Forbidden Door, and when it comes to MJF's character and the story that they're trying to tell with MJF not liking New Japan Pro Wrestling, it makes total sense over here. MJF, let's go through the match. MJF mocks Hiroshi Tanahashi's air guitar. Both lock up and MJF immediately retreats, bro. This crowd is absolutely on fire. We get a kick by MJF. He mocks the air guitar once again. We get a side headlock by MJF. We then get a side headlock by Tanahashi. We get a shoulder tackle by Tanahashi taking MJF to the outside. MJF walks up the ramp, and we get a bunch of coward chants by the crowd. MJF then walks back into the ring, and MJF just screams. He doesn't even have a microphone. He screams to the crowd, "You think I'm a coward?" And he's like, "Sportsmanship." And he offers a handshake to Hiroshi Tanahashi. He offers a handshake, but instead he goes for a kick, but he gets caught by Tanahashi. Tanahashi goes for a left hand, and then MJF pulls Tanahashi into the corner turnbuckle head first. After that, he picks up Tanahashi and drops him on the top rope. We get a bear hug by MJF. We get a series of back elbows by Tanahashi. We get a kick by MJF taking down Tanahashi, and then he flips the camera on the hard cam side. After that, MJF screams, "This is the legend," and we get a roll-up by Tanahashi. After that, we get a near fall. MJF then applies the abdominal stretch. We get a bunch of go ace chants by the crowd. So even though Hiroshi Tanahashi definitely seemed way past his prime in this match, the crowd was still into Hiroshi Tanahashi. MJF gets his hand on the ropes. MJF screams at the ref, "What are you going to do, dipshit?" After that, the referee kicks the hand of MJF out of the rope. After that, we get a running right elbow by Tanahashi. We get a series of rights and lefts by Tanahashi, and then he hits a slam on MJF. Off the second rope, he hits a flipping senton. After that, we get a cover and a near fall. Tanahashi goes to the top, and then MJF comes in. He goes to the second rope, but then Tanahashi pushes MJF off. We get a frog splash by Tanahashi. At this point, Tanahashi is in control. MJF goes to the top, and then we get a right hand by Tanahashi. Tanahashi then slams MJF down to the mat. He ends up going for the sling blade. Now, when it comes to the sling blade, I talk about how, on the collision match that he had with Swerve Strickland, the sling blades that Tanahashi was hitting on Swerve were not really that good. So he hits a sling blade right here. I got to look back at the match to see if that sling blade looked really good, but usually when Tanahashi nowadays hits the sling blade, it just doesn't look good and doesn't even look like a sling blade. It doesn't look as smooth as a normal sling blade would do, because if you would see a guy like Finn Balor hit a sling blade, Finn Balor hits one of the smoothest sling blades I've ever seen, in my opinion. We get a cover by Tanahashi and a near fall. He goes to the top, but then MJF lands on the ropes, knocking Tanahashi onto the top. After that, he goes to the top rope, and he ends up hitting a superplex. After that, we get a cover by MJF and a near fall. MJF takes Tanahashi to the middle rope. Tanahashi pushes MJF for the heat sinker attempt. MJF is about to go for the heat sinker, but then Tanahashi pushes him off. MJF then lands on his knees. We get a cover and a double underhook shoulder breaker by MJF. We get a cover by MJF and a near fall. At this point, MJF is selling his knee. MJF then spits into the face of Tanahashi and says, "You're a legend, and he will tell you what you are. You are a joke." MJF constantly shoves onto the face of Tanahashi. Tanahashi comes back. He stands up. We get a right hand by MJF. He ends up going for another right hand, and then Tanahashi gets poked onto the eyes. MJF then flips the crowd once again, but then Tanahashi catches MJF for the Dragon Screw. After that, Tanahashi goes for a submission, a.k.a. the Texas Cloverleaf. And then he makes MJF go to the ropes. We get a knee by MJF. He picks up Tanahashi, but then Tanahashi counters and takes him down. We then get the sling blade by Tanahashi once again. Tanahashi goes to the top. He ends up hitting the frog splash, but MJF gets the knees up. At this point, MJF sells his knees once again. MJF goes to the outside. He grabs his world title. He comes back into the ring, but then the referee takes it away. Tanahashi immediately goes for the roll-up, but what happens is the referee is not there, so it looks like Tanahashi has MJF pinned, but of course the referee comes in way too late. After that, we get a cover into near fall. MJF pushes Tanahashi to the referee. MJF, without the referee looking, hits him with the Dynamite Diamond Ring, and we got a cover, and MJF wins and retains the AEW World Championship. Overall thoughts on MJF versus Tanahashi. This wasn't a Matt Classic, as a lot of people would immediately think this would be. And we know MJF can wrestle any different style. For people that say MJF cannot wrestle, clearly do not watch the product. Just go back and watch the Iron Man match that MJF and Bryan Danielson had at Revolution a couple of months ago. Those two men absolutely murdered each other. But if you really think about it, everything that both Tanahashi and MJF did in this match was everything that they needed to do. I talked about this in my predictions and in the build-up to this match. MJF sold his ass off for Tanahashi, and MJF made Tanahashi look like $1 million. Tanahashi, of course, as I stated earlier, he is past his prime, and he didn't really look as good as a lot of people thought he would in the match that he had with Swerve Strickland at Collision. But I will say, he did look so much better in this match with MJF than Swerve Strickland. Not to take anything away from Swerve, but MJF definitely made Tanahashi look really good in this match. Everything about this opener made total sense. The fact that the match itself was opening Forbidden Door made sense story-wise. I stress this enough. The fact that people are making dumb-ass comparisons is the most stupidest shit ever. Why would you compare a storyline aspect as to why this match is opening the show rather than, a bullshit reason as to why a world title match is opening the show? Roman Reigns, how many times has opened any pay-per-view? And I hardly ever complained. Whenever Roman Reigns would open the show, I actually was in favor of that. But when it came to the world title last month for Night of Champions, I did not like the idea as to why the world title match would open the show. I would understand later on because of what they did with Jimmy Uso and Roman Reigns, but still, I did not like the idea of a brand new championship and a finals of a tournament to crown a new champion opening the show. This scenario with MJF and Hiroshi Tanahashi was 100% completely different because, again, MJF, his character, embodies everything that the normal stereotypical AEW fan, is against. He's everything that the AEW fan is against. He's a WWE-style wrestler, if you really think about it. MJF embodies what a WWE superstar is. And MJF fucking despises New Japan Pro Wrestling. So the fact that he opened up this show makes total sense. But nonetheless, this was a great opening match to start off Forbidden Door. In our next match of the evening, we got CM Punk in his third match back in his first one-on-one match since Jon Moxley back at All Out last September, taking on Satoshi Kojima in the quarterfinals of the Owen Hart Cup tournament. Now, of course, originally this match was supposed to be CM Punk versus Kenta, but of course the plans for that match fell through because apparently Kenta and New Japan have some issues with one another, and I believe Kenta was the one that kind of pulled out of the whole match. But we had CM Punk versus Satoshi Kojima. This was a great match. If you really think about it, it was kind of a random match that was thrown together, but nonetheless, it was still a good match. I absolutely enjoyed this match, but really, the story of the match was not really revolving around CM Punk and Kojima. It was really revolving around CM Punk and the reaction that he got in Toronto. I talked about this as we were headed near towards CM Punk's impending return at the time to AEW when we were, on the way towards Collision. And I talked about how, yes, he will get a fairly positive reaction in Chicago, but the real test is definitely going to be in all of those other wrestling markets. And definitely CM Punk was tested on Collision, and he was definitely tested on Forbidden Door. 110%. And CM Punk played this crowd so well. He knew the reaction that he was going to be getting because he knows the type of fans that AEW has. AEW fans, bro, are not stupid. I always stated this. AEW fans are not stupid. They know exactly what went down back in September at All Out when he went fucking ballistic at the press conference. But the reaction, man, for CM Punk in Toronto, especially for this show, man, you could say mixed reaction, but really there were more boos than, cheers for CM Punk. And CM Punk played this crowd so fucking well, man. It was very entertaining. And that was really the main story coming into this match. How will the crowd favor CM Punk? And even the commentators on commentary even mentioned that. So you really got to love them for adding that little touch right there. But let's go through this match. We get a side headlock by Satoshi Kojima. We then get a shoulder tackle by Kojima. After that, we get a side headlock by Punk. We get a shoulder tackle once again by Kojima. After that, both lock up. We get repeated rights into the corner by Punk. We get a hip toss by Kojima. We then get a shoulder tackle by Kojima once again. We then get a kick by Punk, and then he sends Kojima to the outside. Punk mocks Kojima by pumping his own pecs. Now, of course, before Punk mocked Kojima, Kojima was pumping his own pecs, and after that, Punk just ended up, mocking Kojima. So that was pretty hilarious. We get a double sledge by Punk on the outside. We then get a chop by Punk onto the outside, and then we get a second chop. Kojima goes for a chop of his own, and then he hits the chop, sending him to the Timekeeper's area. Kojima is in the ring, and then he goes back out. We get a chop by Punk. Kojima ends up going for a chop block onto the apron. Once we're back into the ring, we get repeated stomps by Kojima, and then he ends up going for the leg lariat by Punk. After that, we get a slam by Punk on Kojima, and then he hits a leg drop, and the commentators were like, shades of Hulk Hogan. We get a chop by Punk. After that, Kojima fights back. Both exchange strikes. We get a kick by Punk, and then we get repeated rights onto the second rope by Punk. We then get a kick to the knee of Kojima. We get a cover by Punk and a near fall. Punk ends up going for a side headlock, but then he sends Kojima into the corner. We get repeated lariats by Punk into the corner, and this spot was hilarious. Now, all over social media, everybody saw the joke. When Punk was going for those repeated lariats, he was constantly screaming, lariat, 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 Kojima. That was actually a mention to an old shoot interview that both CM Punk and Samoa Joe did back when they were still a part of Ring of Honor. I think it was 2004 or 2003. Correct me if I'm wrong. And in that shoot interview, CM Punk was talking about Homicide, and he was kind of, in a way, impersonating Homicide, talking about Kojima, lariat, lariat. That is basically what CM Punk was mentioning in this whole spot right here. Fantastic stuff. Hilarious by CM Punk. I love how he added that. CM Punk is just an absolute, and I mean this wholeheartedly, an absolute fucking savage. We get a side slam by CM Punk. We get a cover by Punk and a kick out. Then we get a series of chops by Punk into the corner. After that, Punk lands into the corner, and then Kojima goes for repeated chops into the corner, but then he does it again into the other corner. Kojima is in control. He goes to the top, and then he hits a elbow drop onto the ball sack of CM Punk. That shit was hilarious. We get a cover into near fall. We get a rolling elbow by Kojima, and then he hits the DDT. He tries to go for the cutter, but then Punk escapes. We then get a running knee into the corner. Then we get a clothesline by Punk. Punk goes to the top. We get a shit ton of boos in Toronto at this point. He hits the elbow drop onto the throat of Kojima, so that is basically retaliation from CM Punk on Kojima. And then Punk applies the Anaconda Vice. After that, Kojima tries to fight back. We then get a series of double overhand chops by Punk. He picks up a Kojima. We get a series of elbows by Kojima. We get a series of double chops by Kojima. He continues on. Kojima, he goes for the Koji cutter. Kojima goes for the Koji cutter. After that, Punk ducks the lariat. We get a neckbreaker by Punk, and then we get a cover into near fall. Punk goes for repeated elbows and chops, but then he picks up Kojima. He tries to go for the GTS, but then Kojima counters. Kojima ends up going for the brainbuster after that. Kojima goes for the cover, and we get a kick out. Punk ducks the lariat. He ends up hitting the roundhouse kick, and then he goes for the GTS. We get a cover, and CM Punk wins the match, and now CM Punk advances to the semifinals of the Owen Hart Cup tournament. After that, Punk picks up Kojima in honor of respect of Satoshi Kojima, and the match ends. Overall, man, the match was phenomenal. I loved this match. Again, was it a pretty random match that AEW booked for CM Punk for this Forbidden Door pay-per-view? Absolutely. It was a pretty thrown together random match, and, of course, if CM Punk is involved in the Owen Hart Cup tournament, it makes total sense for CM Punk to basically win this whole tournament. I genuinely believe Punk is definitely going to be winning this whole tournament. But I will say, man, even though I wasn't really as excited as I, would be for like a Punk versus Kenta match, overall, this match definitely delivered. And again, like I said before I even went through the whole match, the story was not about CM Punk and Kojima. The story was about CM Punk and the reaction, and CM Punk basically not fighting the crowd in Toronto, but really playing with the crowd in Toronto. That is exactly what CM Punk did in this match, and I'm 100% down for that because, again, it goes to show you that Punk knows exactly what he is doing. He knows exactly what he is doing. He knew the type of reaction that he was going to be getting in Toronto, and he 100% was just flat out playing with the crowd. You'll love to see it. It's going to be very interesting as we head towards the next week's on Collision with CM Punk and these reactions that he's going to be getting in Canada. And, bro, imagine the reaction that CM Punk would get if he won the whole tournament. That'd be fucking hilarious. But, again, CM Punk, student of the game, he absolutely knows what he's doing, and he delivered 110%, as well as Kojima. Fantastic match by both Punk and Satoshi Kojima. In our next match, we have the four-way match for the AEW International Championship. We got Orange Cassidy taking on the Ring of Honor Pure Champion, Katsuyori Shibata, taking on the current New Japan Pro Wrestling World Television Champion, Zack Sabre Jr., taking on Daniel Garcia. This match was insane. This match was entertaining and definitely hard-hitting at the same time. That is the best analogy that I can give you for this whole match that transpired with all four of these men. And Cassidy, of course, is on a run, and he's on a tear as the current international champion, as well as, of course, Zack Sabre Jr. is on a tear of his own as the World TV champion, and Shibata is doing his own thing as the Pure champion. Did I see Orange Cassidy winning this match? Absolutely. I did not see him losing the international title in a four-way. If he's going to be losing that international title, he is going to be losing it to somebody very, 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 very credible in a one-on-one match. Now, I'm not saying that Shibata and Zack Sabre Jr. and Daniel Garcia are not credible opponents for that. But in the nature of the situation that Cassidy is in a four-way, it would not really make sense for Cassidy to really drop the title in a match scenario like this. So honestly, if they're going to have Orange Cassidy drop the international championship, they're definitely going to have him drop it to somebody credible in a one-on-one match. So maybe a guy like Konosuke Takeshita. Now we got Miro back in the scene of it in AEW, so maybe he could drop the title to Miro. I still have those high hopes. Apparently there's something going on with Rush's contract in AEW, but bro, if Rush, is still going to stick around with AEW, bro, put that title on fucking Rush because he will go on a tear with that international championship. But overall, man, this four-way match was hilarious, fantastic. Some of the spots were intense. Some of the spots were hard-hitting. Of course, you're involving guys like Zack Sabre Jr. and fucking Katsuyori Shibata. I mean, you're going to deal with a lot of crazy shit. But nonetheless, this match was phenomenal. All four men face off. Orange does his amazing kicks. After that, basically, each man passes the boot to one another. After that, a brawl breaks loose. We get a roll-up by Orange on Garcia, and then we get a near fall. Orange ends up going for the tope. After that, Garcia counters the DDT. He applies the Dragon Tamer. After that, we get a kick by Shibata onto the chest of Daniel Garcia. Shibata then comes in with the leg submission. Then Zack Sabre Jr. comes in, and what happens? He fucking twists the head with his feet on the head of Shibata. Goddamn. After that, ZSJ works on Orange. Garcia comes in. He boots Zack Sabre Jr. Shibata comes in. Then both men exchange shots. We then get a series of uppercut exchanges by Shibata and Zack Sabre Jr. Garcia then tries to interfere. And then Garcia gets fucking bitch slapped by fucking Katsuyori Shibata. After that, both Zack Sabre Jr. and Shibata are taking turns, basically giving their own shots on Daniel Garcia. After Daniel Garcia is getting the shit kicked out of him, Garcia just fucking dances, which is hilarious. Then they both attack Garcia. We get a double clothesline by Garcia. Garcia dances once again. We get a roll-up by Orange, and we get a near fall. We get a series of boot exchanges by everybody. All four men knock each other down with a boot. We get a double abdominal stretch by Zack Sabre Jr. and Shibata on both Orange Cassidy and Daniel Garcia. So both of them apply an abdominal stretch submission at the same time. After that, Shibata and Zack Sabre Jr. slap one another. Both men goes for a series of exchanges, but then Garcia and Orange are on the backs of Zack Sabre Jr. and Katsuyori Shibata. Zack Sabre Jr. and Shibata still slap one another. We get a suplex by Shibata, and then we get a suplex. So after this, everybody's just basically taking turn, like a certain turn, and basically everybody is suplexing each other in this moment. So we got a suplex by Shibata. Garcia goes for a suplex. Orange comes in and goes for a suplex. Zack Sabre Jr. comes in and goes for a suplex. And then Shibata comes in with a suplex of his own. So everybody's basically taking turns hitting a goddamn suplex. I love it. Garcia goes for a suplex on Shibata. Orange comes in. Stunt Dog Millionaire on Garcia by Orange Cassidy. He then hits the Tornado DDT. We then get a cover and a near fall. Zack Sabre Jr. grabs the head of Orange Cassidy. He twists and drives the fingers onto the ribs of Orange Cassidy. Garcia has the pure title belt, which is Shibata's belt. And he hits Shibata with it. And of course, it's no disqualification, so he can do it. After that, we get a cover and a near fall. Shibata then no-sells a series of right hands by Garcia. And then Shibata fights back with repeated right hands. We then get a running missile dropkick on Garcia into the corner. Orange then comes into the ring, and then both men sit down. We get a slap by Shibata. Then after that, we get a series of chop exchanges by both. We get a kick by Shibata. Cassidy stops and puts the hands in his pockets. We get the orange punch by Cassidy. But then Cassidy sells his hand. Of course, that is the injured hand that he has been selling throughout the past couple of weeks on AEW television. We get a forearm by Shibata. Orange ends up going for the beach break after that. We then get a cover and a kick out. Zack Sabre Jr. comes in. He stomps onto the injured hand of Cassidy. After that, he stomps on his elbow. He twists the wrist of Cassidy. What the fuck? And we get a bunch of "you sick fuck" chants. ZSJ then applies a submission on Orange. Garcia comes in. We get a kick and an uppercut on Garcia by Zack Sabre Jr. We then get a Stunt Dog Millionaire countered by Zack Sabre Jr. And he applies the mousetrap submission. Then Shibata comes in. He hits a kick onto the back of Zack Sabre Jr. He applies a rear naked choke on ZSJ. After that, we get a boot on Garcia. He misses the PK. We then get a bridge by Zack Sabre Jr. After that, we get a near fall. We get a bunch of counters after counters after counters. We get a cover into near fall when Garcia comes in. Garcia hits a chop. Then he runs into an elbow. Zack Sabre Jr. gets caught. We then get a backslide by Garcia, and then we get a near fall. Garcia goes for the pile driver, and then we get the PK by Shibata, and then pushes Shibata on the outside. We get a cover by Cassidy, and he retains the International Championship. So Cassidy steals the victory from Katsuyori Shibata. After the match, ZSJ has the belt and says that they are not done. And then Shibata comes in. He looks pissed. Zack Sabre Jr. leaves. Shibata and Cassidy face off, and both men shake hands. Overall, this was a great match. Very fantastic match, man. Again, everything about this match, man, this was hard-hitting. Some of the spots were intense and crazy to look at, especially from Shibata and Zack Sabre Jr. Of course, they wrestle that Japanese strong style. Or if you really think about it, Zack Sabre Jr. wrestles that British style, but he does wrestle for New Japan. Shibata wrestles that Japanese style. And some of the shit that he was doing in this match was insane. But I will say, man, who should beat Orange Cassidy? It looks like they're going to be having Orange Cassidy as that international champion for a long period of time. And it looks like they're not going to have him drop that title anytime soon. But again, it made total sense for Orange Cassidy to get the win in this match. Because if he's going to lose that international title, he's going to be losing it to somebody that is very, very, very credible. But phenomenal four-way by both men. After that, we got Sanata versus Jack Perry for the IWGP World Heavyweight Championship. This match, let's be honest with ourselves. Again, this was pretty much the most randomest match that this card has. This was probably the most random match that was put together for Forbidden Door. I'm going to go out on a limb and say I am not familiar with Sanata whatsoever. But from the shit that I've seen with Sanata in the ring, I actually enjoyed watching Sanata wrestle. You know, I know some people do not like Sanata, but I do not watch New Japan on a weekly basis, so I can't really give my opinion on what I actually think of Sanata. But from what I've seen in this match, Sanata looked great against Jack Perry. Jack Perry, of course, Sanata and Jack Perry were kind of going back and forth, you know, in the build-up to this match. There wasn't really no build-up on television, but really in interviews, of course, Sanata talks about how he didn't even know who Jack Perry was, blah, blah, blah. Jack Perry even said the same thing. And then clearly states like, oh, yeah, I did not know, like, I do not know coming into this match. I just do not know anything about Sanata. Meanwhile, during this whole match, Jack Perry is basically, you can tell, like, Jack Perry was studying tape and watching a bunch of Sanata matches, basically preparing himself for this match. But nonetheless, was this match good? Yes. Was it the most randomest match of the entire card? Absolutely. Was Jack Perry going to win the IWGP World Title? Not a fucking chance. No goddamn way was Jack Perry was going to win this match. Absolutely no fucking chance in hell, no pun intended. No chance in hell Jack Perry was going to be winning this match. Let's go through the match. So after that, so in the beginning, I should say, both lock up. We got a side headlock by Jack. We then get a shoulder tackle by Sanata. Jack rolls through. He then applies the snare trap immediately. After that, he makes it to the ropes. We get a kick by Jack Perry, and then we get a kick by Sanata. Sanata's on the apron, and then Jack hits a dropkick, sending Sanata to the outside. Jack Perry ends up going for the tope, and then he sends Sanata to the barricade. And then we get a cover by Jack and a near fall. We get an overhand shot by Sanata, and then we get a kick by Jack Perry. Then Jack hits a boot into the corner. He gets caught. Jack escapes, and Jack takes him down, and then he tries to apply a Paradise Lock. After that, Sanata escapes. Jack is caught with the Paradise Lock applied on him, and then Sanata ends up hitting a dropkick to basically have Jack Perry just break away from the shit that he was trapped in. After that, we get a cover into near fall. Sanata goes for an elbow, and then we get a series of chops by Jack Perry. We get a chop by Sanata. Jack Perry ends up going for repeated right hands, and then we get a boot by Sanata. We then get a dropkick by Jack Perry, and then we get a thrust kick by Jack Perry. He ends up hitting the lariat, and then he goes for the Tiger Driver. After that, we get a cover and a near fall. Sanata ends up going for the suplex, but then both men are on their knees. Both men exchange strikes. We get a furious chop by Jack Perry. After that, Sanata goes for a chop of his own. Jack Perry goes for an uppercut. Sanata, of course, goes for an uppercut of his own. We get a backslide by Jack Perry, and then we get a near fall. We get a crucifix caught by Sanata, and then he proceeds to pick up Jack Perry. Jack Perry ends up going for the skull end, which is Sanata's own move. So it clearly shows that Jungle Boy was actually studying tape before this match from Sanata. After that, Sanata gets his foot onto the bottom rope. Sanata picks up Jack, and then Hook, or I should say Jack escapes. I was about to say Hook. Hook was involved in the end, and I'll talk about what happened after. Sanata then picks him up. He ends up hitting the TKO, and then we get a cover and by Sanata and a near fall. Sanata goes to the top, and then he misses the moonsault. He picks up Jack. He tries to go for the skull end, but then Jack Perry ends up going for the Poison Rana. After that, Sanata goes for the skull end, and then he spins him around. Jack Perry goes for the roll-up and a near fall, and then we get a thrust kick by Jack. Sanata ends up going for the Poison Rana, and then he ends up going for the Shining Wizard. He goes to the top, and then he hits the moonsault, and this was a very beautifully done moonsault, I will say that. We get a cover, and Sanata wins the match, and he retains the IWGP World Heavyweight Championship. versus Jack Perry for the IWGP World Title. We got the Hungbucks, Hangman Page and the Young Bucks teaming up with Eddie Kingston and New Japan Pro Wrestling's Tomohiro Ishii, taking on the Blackpool Combat Club, Konosuke Takeshita, and Shota Umino. This 10-man tag, man, awesome stuff. Absolutely awesome stuff that happened in this match. Takeshita was phenomenal, probably the whole MVP of this whole match. It was either Ishii or Takeshita. Whenever those two guys would enter in the ring, those guys would just beat the living shit out of each other. Ishii looked fucking great in this match. Shota Umino was great as well. Of course, Blackpool Combat Club consisting of Jon Moxley, Claudio Castagnoli, and Wheeler Yuta. Of course, Bryan Danielson is going to be wrestling Okada later on this show in the main event. But overall, this match was great. The Young Bucks and Hangman Page looked phenomenal. Ishii looked great. Eddie Kingston, that was basically the biggest takeaway from this whole match. Eddie Kingston, where does he lie? Of course, he has a lot of tension with Jon Moxley, of course, dating back to really, if you think about it, last year's Forbidden Door, when Claudio Castagnoli was the mystery opponent for Zack Sabre Jr., and Claudio Castagnoli was officially a part of the Blackpool Combat Club, and he was going to be a part of that Blood and Guts match that was going to be happening after. So honestly, man, of course, that was basically the biggest takeaway. I loved the story that they were telling with Eddie Kingston, kind of like really being pissed off at, Jon Moxley for really teaming up with that scumbag, Claudio Castagnoli. Really the tension with Eddie Kingston and Jon Moxley, but really the tension with Eddie Kingston and Claudio definitely showcased in this match, and I loved every second of it. Claudio and Eddie Kingston start. Claudio, the douchebag that he is, tags in Shota Umino. Hangman makes the tag. Shota goes for a right hand, but then Shota is in control over Hangman. We get an arm drag by Shota, and then we get a boot by Hangman, and then Hangman goes for the high boot. Ishii makes the tag, and then Shota fights off both men. Both men scream at each other, and actually what happens is we get Shota flipping them off, and they then take out Shota Umino. Konosuke Takeshita tags in, and we get a series of huge boos for Konosuke Takeshita. Both men exchange shots. We get a huge elbow no-sold by Tomohiro Ishii. We get an elbow by Ishii, and then both no-sell their shoulder tackles. We get a series of shoulder tackles by Ishii, and after that, both men knock each other down. Nick and Matt tag in, and then we get a Hurricane Rana by Nick. We get a double team attempt by the Bucks. Moxley tags in. Eddie tags in. The crowd goes absolutely crazy. Both men face off, and just the crowd goes apeshit. We get an elbow by Moxley, and then we get a chop by Kingston, and then we get a chop by Mox. Both men exchange chops. Yuta comes in, but then Moxley chops Nick Jackson. Everybody else comes in, and then we get a brawl breaking loose. Moxley and Eddie go for a series of chop exchanges. After that, the Bucks take out everybody off the top onto the outside. Hangman goes to the top, and he hits the Orihara moonsault. After that, Mox and Eddie continue with their chop exchanges. Claudio comes in and hits an uppercut on Eddie Kingston. Claudio tags in. He stomps at Eddie, and then we get another uppercut by Claudio. Eddie fights back and goes for a series of chops. Claudio hits a lariat after that. He drags Eddie into the corner. Wheeler Yuta, the little shit himself, says Bryan Danielson. Wheeler Yuta tags in, and he hits repeated rights on Eddie Kingston. Takeshita tags in. He applies a camel clutch on Eddie, but then Ishii goes for a series of elbows. And what happens is Takeshita hits an elbow, but when Takeshita hit this goddamn elbow, he knocked the living shit out of Ishii. That spot was crazy. Shota is the legal man at this point. We get a neckbreaker by Eddie Kingston. We get a cover and a near fall. After that, Claudio tags in. We get an uppercut by Claudio into the corner. We get repeated uppercuts by Eddie Kingston. Eddie catches the boot and hits a lariat. At this point, Matt Jackson is going crazy. Matt Jackson blocks Eddie from basically... Mox, not Matt Jackson. Moxley blocks Eddie from making the tag. At this point, Mox is legal. We get a series of chop exchanges by both once again. Both hit each other with lariats. Shota and Ishii tag in. We get a shoulder tackle by Ishii. Yuta tags in. Ishii takes out Yuta, but then Claudio no-sells the shoulder tackle. We then get an uppercut by Ishii. He proceeds to pick up Ishii, but then Ishii hits a brainbuster after that. Shota then, from behind, attacks Ishii. Ishii then gets taken into the corner, but then we get a running boot by Takeshita. We then get a knee strike. We then get a rolling elbow by Takeshita, and then we get a powerbomb reversed DDT combo by both Takeshita and Shota Umino. Phenomenal stuff. After that, we get a cover into near fall. Moxley tags in, and then we get a German by Ishii on Moxley. Then we get a side slam by Ishii on Shota Umino. Hangman tags in, Takeshita tags in, and then we get a boot by Hangman. We then get a rolling elbow on Takeshita. Hangman then takes out Yuta, but then he ends up hitting the fall-away slam on Takeshita. Hangman then over the top takes out Yuta. He sends Claudio to the ring post, and then Takeshita gets caught by the Bucks onto the outside. After that, Hangman goes for a running shooting star press off the apron. Hangman goes to the top, and then he drives a lariat on Takeshita. After that, we get a cover and another near fall. Takeshita then picks up Hangman. Hangman escapes. We get a furious elbow by Takeshita. And then we get a triple team by, of course, the Hungbucks, Hangman Adam Page and the Young Bucks. Matt tags in. We get a super kick by Nick. We get a double team by the Bucks on Takeshita. They end up hitting the BTE trigger. And then we get a double German suplex by Takeshita on both of the Young Bucks. Takeshita then runs into a super kick by the Bucks. We get a super kick on Shota and then on Claudio. We then get a series of super kicks on Moxley, but then Eddie pushes Moxley out of the way. Then Matt gets hit with the Death Rider by Moxley. Takeshita goes for the Blue Thunder Bomb. We get a cover and a kick out. Wheeler Yuta tags in. He takes Matt Jackson. Matt fights back. Then we get a super kick that was blocked. Takeshita takes Matt Jackson. He drives him down. We get a deadlift German by Takeshita. We then get a German by Yuta, and then we get a cover into near fall. Moxley then takes out Matt, but then Claudio goes for the Cesaro swing. I still call it the Cesaro swing on Matt Jackson. And then we get a cover by Yuta, and everybody jumps in to break it up. Claudio then drives his elbows on Matt Jackson, but then Yuta goes to the top, but then Nick comes in. He takes out Yuta. Ishii tags in, and then we get a clothesline into the corner by Yuta, or I should say on Yuta. He takes Yuta to the top. We get a superplex by Ishii, and then after that we get a cover by Ishii and a near fall. Eddie Kingston comes in. We get a series of double shots on Yuta. After that, we get a double into Giri. After that, Claudio is on the apron. Eddie then sends him to the post, but then we get a cover by Yuta and a near fall when Matt Jackson comes in. Shota then comes in. We get a DDT by Nick. Takeshita goes for a lariat on Matt Jackson. We get a powerbomb by Hangman. Everybody comes in. We get a cutter on Mox, or I should say by Mox on Eddie Kingston. We get a double super kick on Mox, and then on Yuta, we get a tope by Matt Jackson. Then Yuta's in the corner, or I should say Yuta's in the center. He is about to get hit with the buckshot lariat, but what happens is Yuta actually ducks it. Hangman goes for the German. We get a sliding lariat by Ishii, and then we get a lariat by Ishii once again. He ends up hitting the brainbuster, and then we get a cover and the baby faces. That being the Elite, or I should say the Hungbucks, Hangman Adam Page, the Young Bucks, Tomohiro Ishii, and Eddie Kingston win the match. After that, Eddie Kingston is so pissed off at the Bucks after the match because, of course, he had to fight his friend Jon Moxley because of all the tension going on and the fact that Moxley is dealing with Claudio, even though Eddie Kingston does not like Claudio. This was a great 10-man tag, man. Now, I actually expected the Blackpool Combat Club to actually get the win, but from what it looks like, we're definitely going to, this feud is still not over, and the blow-off is going to be at Blood and Guts. Now, what's interesting is that after the Okada match, Bryan Danielson actually, I believe, injured his shoulder, and he's going to be out for roughly from 6 to 8 weeks. So he's definitely going to be missing Blood and Guts. And we know for a fact we're going to be getting Blood and Guts. I believe Fightful reported that Blood and Guts is going to be taking place at the TD Garden. So that's going to be in a couple of weeks. And it's definitely going to be Blackpool Combat Club versus the Elite. Now, what's interesting is, with Danielson out, who could replace Danielson? I could easily see it being Shota Umino, but it all depends on Shota Umino's schedule. I know we got the G1 coming up apparently, so we don't know what's going on there, but Danielson is not going to be a part of Blood and Guts. But nonetheless, everybody shined in this 10-man tag team match. It was great. Eddie Kingston, this was really the Eddie Kingston match. Really, the story was, in a way, kind of revolving around Eddie Kingston and just the tension that he has with Jon Moxley because of the fact that Jon Moxley is teaming up with Claudio, even though Eddie Kingston does not like Claudio. That was kind of the main takeaway from this whole match. And honestly, I think AEW should really re-explore the program, a future program, hopefully, between Jon Moxley and Eddie Kingston, but this time have it be the roles being reversed. And Eddie Kingston is the babyface and Jon Moxley is the hero. But one thing I should say about Eddie Kingston, man, is Eddie Kingston needs to win a championship in AEW. He really does. Eddie Kingston, my biggest takeaway that I can give you to describe Eddie Kingston is he is a guy that demands your attention, and he is a guy that just really makes you believe everything that he is saying, and he makes you believe everything that he does that is in that ring, because everything that Eddie Kingston does is real. The Eddie Kingston that you see on television, in my opinion, is the Eddie Kingston in real life. Eddie Kingston, man, y'all need to put a title on this man, whether it's the world title, TNT title, international title, who knows? Bro, y'all need to put a title on Eddie Kingston. He's too damn talented not to have a title. But that is just my opinion on the scenario. This this 10-man tag team match was great. I loved it. We got the women's title match. We got Toni Storm taking on Willow Nightingale. I'm going to be honest. This was probably the weakest match of the whole card. Not to say the match was bad, because the match was not bad whatsoever. It was actually a great match. But again, if you want to compare it to all the other matches that were going on this show, this was definitely the weakest match of the whole card, in my opinion. I'm not really going to go through a lot about the match. Toni Storm retreats to the outside. Storm comes back. We got a roll-up by Willow and a near fall. We get a shoulder tackle by Willow, and then we get another roll-up by Willow. We get a slam by Willow Nightingale. We get a running hip attack into the corner. Later on in the match, Toni Storm is in control. Willow reverses Toni and drives her down to the mat. And then we get a running hip attack into the corner. We get a boot by Willow. Storm ends up going for a cutter. After that, on the apron, Willow hits the Death Valley driver. She picks up Storm, and she ends up hitting a Death Valley driver into the ring. We get a cover and a near fall. After that, the referee grabs the spray paint of Ruby Soho and Saraya, and both of them get banned from the match. Willow then counters the Storm Zero attempt. We get a cover into near fall. We get a clothesline by Willow. Willow goes to the middle rope, and then she misses the moonsault. Storm ends up going for the DDT after that. We get a hip attack by Storm, and then she hits the DDT after that. We get a cover into near fall, but then Storm boots the face of Willow Nightingale. Then we get a slap by Willow. We then get a spine buster by Willow Nightingale, and then Willow goes for the Indian Deathlock. Storm fights back with the series of chops, but then Willow fights back with the chops of her own. After that, the lock is still applied, but then Willow goes for the pounce. Period. After that, Storm goes on the outside, but then Willow takes her back into the ring. Willow goes for the hip attack, but then we get a series of lariats into the corner on Storm. Storm blocks the referee. She gouges the eyes of Willow. She ends up hitting the Storm Zero, and Toni Storm retains the AEW Women's World Championship. Nothing really special coming out of this match. Willow Nightingale is great. I love Willow Nightingale. She's growing on me week by week by week. She's kind of like a mainstay now on television, on AEW television every week. But Willow Nightingale, man, she's growing very much with me. I'm a big Willow Nightingale fan. Toni Storm looks great, but there was no way in hell that Toni Storm was going to be losing that title. You know, the whole Outcast thing, I'm through with it. I think Toni Storm should really just be on her own, but I'm just sick and tired of the Outcast. That's just my opinion on the nature of the situation. After that, we got the match of the decade. We got the match of the decade, probably the spectacle, I should say, of the decade. Kenny Omega, the best bout machine, the current, or I should say former IWGP United States Heavyweight Champion, taking on Will Ospreay for the U.S. title. This match, man, pure fucking perfection. From the moment the bell rang, you knew shit was going to go down. You just knew shit was going to go down. Absolutely, man. These fucking guys killed and murdered. And yes, even though they're the same, they have the same meaning, I'm using those two words. Both of those guys killed and murdered each other in that fucking ring. You know, I could easily come on here and say the match started off slow, but nah, man. You could say the match definitely started off slow, but the atmosphere in the crowd was just out of this fucking world. Because everybody knew the talent that both Kenny Omega and Will Ospreay possessed. Of course, there was a lot of callbacks to their first Wrestle Kingdom match that happened this past January. But this match was very different than the Wrestle Kingdom match. Of course, we had Don Callis be involved in this match. Not once, but twice. He actually got banned from the ring, only to fucking come back. WWE did the exact same thing at WrestleMania with Solo Sikoa. That shit made no goddamn sense. But that's really my only negative I have for that match. But everything else, man, just insanity. Insanity. That is the best, one-word explanation that can really describe this match. This match was insanity. This match was chaos. This match was brutal. This match was beautiful. This match was a spectacle. Every word that you can describe to put over this match, it was. This match was perfect. And if you honestly want to call this match the best match of 2023, honestly, I can't get mad at you at fucking all. I really cannot. I cannot get mad at you at all. This match was a spectacle. Let's go through the match, shall we? The crowd is going apeshit. Actually, take that back first. Before the match, of course, their entrances. Kenny Omega, of course, came out to Devil's Sky, which is his New Japan theme. Will Ospreay comes out to Elevated, which is my favorite Will Ospreay theme. I don't like the other theme that he uses. Of course, that's the United Empire theme. I love Elevated. That's like my favorite Will Ospreay theme. I'm glad that he came out with it, but it was a great, nicely well-produced video package. Of course, the biggest takeaway from this whole match is Will Ospreay is in enemy territory. He's in Canada, and he is booed out of the fucking building. The crowd in Toronto hated this guy. We get a bunch of holy shit chants. And let's start with the match. Both men lock up. We get a side headlock by Will Ospreay. After the match, we get an elbow by Kenny. We get a side headlock by Kenny, but then Will works onto the arm of Kenny. We get a side headlock takeover by Kenny. Will goes for the head scissors, and we get a series of transitions back and forth. So they start off really like a traditional wrestling match and then immediately do their crazy shit. After that, we get a series of head scissors by Will. Kenny twists the head of Will Ospreay. We get a chop by Kenny into the corner. He ends up going for a right hand after that. Will goes for repeated right hands. We get a chop by Will Ospreay. Kenny gets sent into the corner. We get a boot by Kenny. He tries to go for the one-winged angel, but that's countered. Will tries to go for the Os Cutter. That shit was countered. Snapdragon Suplex. That was countered. Arm drag by Will. After that, we get a bunch of "This is Wrestling" chants by the crowd. After that, Will pokes the eyes of Kenny Omega. We get a chop by Will into the corner. We get a knee by Will. He sends Kenny into the corner, but then Kenny escapes. We get a Hurricane Rana by Kenny. He picks him up. He goes for the "You Can't Escape" moonsault, and we get a cover into near fall. Kenny goes for a somersault attempt, but then Don Callis gets involved. Don Callis, of course, is just on the outside. Then, of course, Kenny Omega tries to chase away Don Callis, but the security that Will Ospreay came out to blocked Kenny. After that, the referee bans Don Callis from the ring. And then we get a crossbody over the top rope by Will Ospreay on Kenny. He sends Kenny face first onto the steel steps. After that, he sends Kenny to the post. We get an elbow by Will on Kenny. Once we're back into the ring, we get a spinning backbreaker by Will Ospreay. We get a cover and a near fall. We then get a shot to the back of Kenny. We get a chop by Will. We get a chop by Kenny. We then get a kick by Will. He then proceeds to pick up Kenny. And then after that, he goes for the vertical suplex. Will goes for the abdominal stretch. We get a drop kick by Kenny. And then we get a leg drop by Kenny, a.k.a. the Couture Crusher. After that, we get a knee by Kenny. We get a dunk by Omega. And then we get a cover and a near fall. Kenny tries to pick up Ospreay. And then we get a kick by Kenny, a chop, all that type of stuff. Ospreay takes Kenny to the top rope later on. He goes to the top, and he hits a fucking shooting star press onto the back of Kenny. Keep in mind, Kenny was, I believe, hanging on the middle rope. This man hit a goddamn shooting star press off the top on the back of Kenny Omega. This man is not human at all. Os Cutter on Kenny from the apron. On the apron, I should say. He hits the Os Cutter on the apron. Will takes Omega to the announce table. And this is shades from their Wrestle Kingdom match. He drives the head of Kenny on the lid of the announce table. Kenny tries to block Will, but then he drives his head a third time. Will then takes the lid off the desk. At this point, Kenny Omega is busted open. He drives his head again onto the lid. At this point, Kenny is down. And we get a bunch of "Still a Wanker" chant. Yeah, we got "Still a Wanker" chants. Kenny is up, but Kenny is limping. We get a right hand by Will. We get a series of right hands by Will. Then, of course, blood is on the fucking muscle on the arm of Will. And this man just licks. He licks his own arm with Kenny Omega's blood on it. And we get a bunch of "you sick fuck" chants. Talk about fucking heel heat. We get repeated elbows by Will Ospreay. He shoves through the face of Kenny. Kenny tries to fight back, but then Will is just dominating the majority of this match. Will Ospreay mocks Kenny, and then he hits Kenny Omega's own move. He hits the V-trigger. Will Ospreay snatches the Canadian flag from the front row, and he shoves it up his ass. Shades of Shawn Michaels in 1997. He puts it in his nose. Omega then goes for a clothesline. Kenny gets the flag. He chokes Will, and he throws him across the ring. He throws him into the other corner, but then Will is hanging on the apron, getting choked out by Kenny Omega. Kenny holds the flag up. He gives it to the kids in the front row. Omega ends up going for the V-trigger on the barricade. Kenny then takes the head of Ospreay to the steel steps and basically retaliates on Will Ospreay and drives his head repeatedly on the steel steps. At this point, Will Ospreay is busted open. After that, Kenny drives him again on the steel steps. Kenny is on top of the steps. He takes Will up and hits a fucking DDT on the steps. He takes Will back into the ring. Kenny goes for repeated right hands. We get the body scissors by Kenny, and then he applies the Jujigatami. He wrenches on his arm, and then he tries to apply the triangle, and then Will gets Kenny up. We get a power bomb by Will. After that, Will goes for a German on Omega. After that, Kenny gets back up on his feet. We get a German by Kenny. We get a German by Will. Kenny gets back up. Kenny tries to go for the Snapdragon, but then gets countered by Will Ospreay. We get a V-trigger by Kenny. Will Ospreay goes for the standing Spanish fly. We get a cover engineer fall. Will, if you want to talk about heel heat, Will Ospreay's in Canada. Of course, he goes for the fucking sharpshooter. He goes for the sharpshooter. He drags Kenny to the center of the ring. Kenny almost taps out, but then Kenny escapes. He then tries to apply the crossface, and we get a bunch of "you sick fuck" chants by the crowd. Yeah, after applying the crossface, we get a bunch of "you sick fuck" chants. I wonder where that came from. Of course, the crossface is by He Who Shall Not Be Named. Omega then tries to roll through. Will then goes for repeated rights, and he basically tries to escape the crossface. Kenny makes it to the ropes. We get a series of kicks by Will. Will goes for a chop. We get repeated kicks by Will. We then get another chop by Will. He kicks again. We get a chop again. Later on, Kenny tries to chop him, but then it didn't work. Like, literally, when he tried to chop back at Will Ospreay, that wasn't nearly as effective as Will Ospreay's chops. So Kenny's just fucking gassed. We get a chop by Kenny. Kenny, of course, goes for a series of rights and lefts. We get a headbutt by Will. Os Cutter countered by Kenny with a kick. And that was actually a pretty awesome spot. He goes for the Os Cutter, and then Kenny just goes for the knee right onto the back of Will Ospreay. We get a Snapdragon by Kenny. He goes for a second Snapdragon. We get a series of back elbows by Will. Then we get a knee onto the back of Will. Kenny goes for the Poison Rana. After that, he goes for the pile driver. He goes for the cover and a near fall. We get a neck breaker by Kenny. A V-trigger into the corner. He takes Will into the corner. And then he thinks of an avalanche Snapdragon suplex, but then Will Ospreay escapes. But then Will is up on the shoulders of Kenny, but then Will escapes once again. We got a thrust kick onto the face of Kenny. After that, Kenny is on the outside. Will goes to the top. And then he goes for the Sky Twister press off the top on the outside on Kenny Omega. Once we're back into the ring, Will is on the top. We get a shot to the back of Kenny Omega. Kenny ducks the hidden blade by Will Ospreay. Both block one another. Will Ospreay goes for the Liger Bomb. We get a near fall. Os Cutter by Will. Cover by Will and a near fall. He goes for the Stormbreaker, but then Kenny takes him up. He drives Will down on his head. So what happened was he looked like he was going to go for the Stormbreaker, but instead he ended up hitting the Tiger Driver 91. Not the Tiger Driver 98. The Tiger Driver 91. And when I say Kenny landed on his fucking head, he fucking landed on his head. That spot was brutal. A lot of people were talking about this after the match was over, and a lot of people were afraid of Kenny's health. Apparently, both men are okay, but, bro, I was so afraid for Kenny Omega's health after that spot, bro. Like, clearly this was a one-time thing. I don't think they're going to be utilizing this spot at all because it's that fucking brutal, but Jesus Christ, Kenny landed on his fucking neck. He could have easily broken his neck and his career would have been over. But thankfully, nothing happened. But still, just pure brutality. Pure brutality, I should say. I'm tongue-tied. Jesus Christ. It's a common occurrence right here on the WrestleHavoc Podcast. Don Callis comes back. We get a bunch of piece of shit chants. Why the fuck is Don Callis coming back after he got banned by the referee? I have no idea. Kenny takes Will. We get a knee strike on Will. We get a second knee strike and then a third. Don Callis interferes. Then Omega goes for the V-trigger. Don holds on to Will, and then the referee comes in, tries to basically avoid Don Callis. Not avoid, but just separate Don Callis and Will. After that, Don holds on to Will, and he takes out of his pocket a screwdriver, gives it to Ospreay. Ospreay is up on the shoulders of Omega and hits Omega with the fucking screwdriver. After that, he ends up going for the hidden blade. After that, we get a Stormbreaker by Will Ospreay. We get a cover, and Kenny gets his foot on the rope. At this point, Don is on the ear of Will Ospreay. And we get a cover, and after that, actually no, he's on the ear of Will. We get a bunch of fuck you chants on Don Callis, of course. We get a knee by Will on Kenny. And he takes Kenny up. And this was the spot, not only the spot of the entire match, but the spot of the night. Will Ospreay takes Kenny up, and he hits Kenny Omega's own move, the One-Winged Angel. He hits the One-Winged Angel. What happens? Will Ospreay goes for the cover. Not even a 2 count. This man, Kenny Omega, was like, fuck you. I am not getting pinned by my own move. This man kicked out at 1. And as soon as he kicked out at 1, the crowd in Toronto went fucking ballistic. They went fucking crazy for this goddamn spot. Cover and a 1 count. A 1 count after that One-Winged Angel. After that, man, the crowd is just up on their fucking feet. Both men fight it out. We get a bunch of slap exchanges. Knee by Kenny. Super kick by Will. Brainbuster by Kenny. Kenny takes Will up. Then he takes Will and hits a German. We get a cover into near fall. V-trigger by Kenny. He takes Will up. Will escapes. We get a Stormbreaker countered. We get an elbow by Will. Then after that, Tiger Driver on Kenny. We get a cover and a fucking kick out. After that, Will Ospreay ends up going for the hidden blade. We get a Stormbreaker by Will. We get a cover, and Will Ospreay wins the IWGP United States Heavyweight Championship. What are my thoughts on this fucking match? I don't know about y'all, man, but this match was crazy. And if I messed up a couple of spots, in the match and probably a little bit of the order of when these spots happened, my apologies, because I was so invested with what I was fucking watching that my notes got fucked up. But I don't give a shit. I don't know what to say, but I'm speechless, man. This match was off the charts. Off the fucking charts. Will Ospreay, I don't give a shit what anybody says. You can call him a fucking indie wrestler. You can call him whatever the fuck you want. A flippy wrestler. A lot of these old-timers love calling these new wrestlers flippy wrestlers. You can call Will Ospreay anything you fucking want. But the one thing you have to admit, after that match, Will Ospreay is the best wrestler, period. He is the best in ring. That is the key word. In ring. I said ing. In ring wrestler in the world. He is the best. Clearly is the best. Will Ospreay is just out of this fucking world. I don't want to say, did they top their first Wrestle Kingdom match? Honestly, I do not know. I have to actually go back and watch Wrestle Kingdom, their Wrestle Kingdom 17 match. But both matches, man, are literally on par with each other. That is the best explanation that I can give you for how good this match was. The atmosphere in the crowd, the story that they told in the ring, phenomenal story. Phenomenal story that they told in the ring. The heat that Will Ospreay was getting in Canada was out of this fucking world. That's legit heel heat right there. The fact that he pulled a Shawn Michaels in 1997 and grabbed the flag, shoved it up his ass, wiped it with his ass, and literally put it on top of his nose. That is some Shawn Michaels 1997 shit right there. Clearly 1997 Shawn Michaels shit. But man, that Tiger Driver spot with Will Ospreay with Kenny landing on his head, that was fucking brutal. The one-winged angel spot by Will Ospreay, with Kenny Omega kicking out at 1, that was fucking amazing. Everything about this match just screamed perfection. It screamed spectacle, because that is exactly what it was. I guarantee you, if you are a WWE fan and just absolutely despise AEW for everything that it stands for, I know for a fact they probably watched this match and they were probably like, you know what, man? I fucking hate AEW, but like this match was fucking awesome. That I guarantee you that is exactly what they think. I guarantee you had people in WWE watch this fucking match too. Period. I know for a fact people in WWE were watching this fucking match. All eyes were on this match. And these men possibly delivered the best match of the year. This match was off the charts, man. Just out of this world, phenomenal. Just everything about it. Everything that any word that you can describe this match, it was. To put this match over any word that you can put this match over in, it was. Like that. That's how good this match was, man. Kenny Omega's contract is coming up by the end of this year, man. Bro, after this match, pay Kenny anything he wants. Give Kenny Omega everything that he wants, man. Seriously. You can't afford losing this guy. And I know for a fact WWE is going to be looking at this and be like, yo, we're going to get Kenny Omega. Yeah, we're going to try to snatch Kenny Omega away from them. What about Will Ospreay? When is his contract in New Japan up? You don't think AEW wants to sign this man to an AEW contract? I know for a fact AEW wants to sign Will Ospreay. Clearly. But both of these men, man, delivered from what it looks like now. We're not through with 2023 yet, and there could possibly be a lot of other matches happening. But, bro, these men delivered the match of 2023. This match was not only the best match of 2023, this was the match of the decade, and this was the spectacle of the decade. That is the best way I can describe Will Ospreay versus Kenny Omega to you guys. That is how good this match was. Fucking phenomenal. Pure, just amazingness by both of these men. This match was just awesome on all levels. On all fucking levels. Fantastic stuff. Hats off to Kenny Omega and Will Ospreay. After that, we are right now an hour and 15 minutes into this review, and we got 2 matches left. We got Sting, Darby Allin, Tetsuya Naito versus Chris Jericho, Sammy Guevara, and Minoru Suzuki. I'm going to go out on a limb and say this. This match was fine. It wasn't a bad match. I loved the involvement of Tetsuya Naito. Sting looked great. Darby Allin looked great. Jericho and Sammy Guevara looked great as well. But, of course, with this match being the match that follows Ospreay versus Omega, did it live up to the standards that I wanted this match to be? No, it did not. There were some spots. There was actually one particular spot that I actually did not like. And that spot was Sting being on the table and taking either a 630 or a 450, whatever it was, by Sammy Guevara off the top through the ladder. Not through the ladder, through the table. I did not like that spot whatsoever. But was this match bad? No, it was a good match. But again, I felt like the crowd was kind of burnt out after that, the amazingness that we saw with Will Ospreay and Kenny Omega. But let's go through the match real quick. Naito and Sammy start the match. We get the Tranquilo by Tetsuya Naito. Of course, he is a part of Los Ingobernables de Japón. Naito goes after Sammy. We get a kick by Naito. We then get a drop kick by Sammy. Sammy then poses. Sammy then gets taken to the outside. Naito runs the ropes and poses in the ring, which was fucking awesome to see. We get a springboard missed by Sammy. We then get an arm drag by Naito. We then get a drop kick by Naito. Darby tags in. Then Minoru Suzuki tags in. We get a right hand by Darby on Suzuki, and then we get a right hand on Suzuki. Both men exchange shots. We get a furious elbow by Suzuki knocking down Darby. We then get an overhand chop by Darby, and then we get a slap by Suzuki, but then Darby fights back. We then get a coffin splash caught by Suzuki, and then we get a roll-up by Darby into near fall. Sting tags in. Jericho wants to tag him, but then Suzuki doesn't want to, but he ends up tagging Jericho instead. Jericho and Sting face off, but then Suzuki comes in, a brawl breaks loose. Sting and Jericho are in the ring. We get a bunch of holy shit chants, both exchange shots. Sting gets taken into the corner. Jericho then lands into the corner. Sting applies the Scorpion Deathlock. Sammy goes for the cutter off the top on Sting, which I did not like. Then Jericho tags in. We get a double team by the heels. We get the pose by the La Sex Gods, and then Suzuki comes in and poses on top of them. So it's instead of the La Sex Gods, it's the Suzuki Gods. Sammy then goes for repeated rights, and then Sting grabs Sammy and drops him down. Darby Allin tags in. We get a series of coffin splashes in the corner. We get the code red by Darby, and then we get a cover into near fall. Darby goes to the top, but then Sammy comes in. We get the Spanish Fly by Sammy. We get a cover by Sammy into near fall. We get a chop by Sammy, but then Sammy runs into the corner. We get a headbutt knocking both men down. Naito and Jericho tag in. We get a kick by Naito. We get a Hurricane Rana by Naito. Naito spits in the face of Jericho. We then get a twisting neckbreaker by Naito. We get an elbow by Naito. After that, Jericho catches him with the sleeper. All heels apply the sleepers on the baby faces. Sting sends Suzuki to the outside. Darby goes for a tope, and then he goes for another tope on Jericho, but then Jericho ends up hitting the Judas effect on Darby. We get a knee strike by Sammy on Naito, but then Sting gets sent to the barricade. Jericho then takes out a table, and then he takes Sting on top of the table. Jericho and Sammy argue, and he demands Sammy to hit a 630 or a 450, whatever it was. I believe it was a 450, or if it wasn't, it was a 630, one of those two moves. He demands Sammy to hit it, and he ends up hitting the 630. Again, I did not like this spot. For a guy, that is the age of Sting, I think a guy like Sting, even though I've been enjoying Sting's in-ring stuff, Sting shouldn't really, be putting himself through tables. That's just my opinion. We get a roll-up by Naito into near fall. Naito and Jericho fight it out. Jericho goes for the Lion Salt. Naito tries to go for the Destino, but Jericho blocks it. Jericho applies the walls, but then Sting comes back. He applies the Scorpion Deathlock. Suzuki comes in. He applies the Sleeper on Sting, but then we get a drop kick on Suzuki by Naito. Jericho goes for the Codebreaker, and then after that, we get a cover by Jericho and a near fall. We get the leg drop by Jericho on Naito. Suzuki tags in. We get a stomp by Suzuki, but then we get a boot by Suzuki. We get a running kick by Suzuki, and then he applies a sleeper. Naito fights back, but then Sting comes in. Then he fights off Suzuki. Then we get the double team by Sting and Naito. We get a roll-up by Naito, and the babyfaces get the win. After the match, Jericho tries to attack Naito, but then Sting disarms Jericho, and the heels all retreat. Overall, thoughts on this match? Again, how can you follow Ospreay versus Omega? There's no fucking way that you can follow that match. But was it a bad match? No, but the crowd wasn't really that into it. And it sucks because I really like Sting. I like Darby. I like Jericho. I love Tetsuya Naito. But again, the crowd wasn't really into it because I felt like they were a little bit burnt out after the intensity that was Will Ospreay versus Kenny Omega. But it was a fine match, but it didn't really live up to the standards that I definitely expected this match to be. After that, we got Bryan Danielson, the main event. Bryan Danielson taking on the Rainmaker of New Japan Pro Wrestling, Kazuchika Okada. Now, number one thing I want to talk about when it comes to this match. Was this match great? Yeah, it was a good match. Did it end a little bit randomly? Yes, I do think it was. Was the crowd as into the match as you would expect them to be? Not as much. In the beginning, yes, but then later on, not really as much. Was this match better than Kenny Omega versus Will Ospreay? No, it was not. But that is not the fault of Kenny Omega. That is not the fault of Kenny Omega or Will Ospreay, or that is not the fault of Danielson and Okada. Danielson and Okada did everything that they wanted to do in the match. Now, what if the matches were reversed and Omega and Ospreay were the ones that closed the match? Possibly, a lot of people talked about how Kenny Omega and Will Ospreay should have closed the show. I'm going to go on a limb and say the argument is, for my argument, when it comes to that scenario is, even if Kenny Omega and Will Ospreay closed the show, they would have probably had been in the same predicament as what we actually got with Bryan Danielson and Kazuchika Okada. And what I mean by that is Bryan Danielson and Okada, if they didn't, close the show and they were in the position of Ospreay and Omega, like we got actually last night, they would have stolen the show and the crowd would have gotten burnt out, and Kenny Omega and Will Ospreay would have been in the same predicament that we actually got with Okada and Danielson. But I will say, Danielson looked great, Okada looked great, but was it better than Omega versus Ospreay? No, Absolutely not, it wasn't. But the biggest takeaway was the entrance, man. Tony Khan. I hate using this term, but you fucking money mark. This man got the license for a one-time gig to use Europe's Final Countdown, Bryan Danielson's old Ring of Honor theme song. Bro, let me tell you, I marked the fuck out when he came out the Final Countdown. I marked the fuck out. The crowd immediately was erupting for this whole shit. And as soon as, they were going for, it's the final countdown, the crowd was just like, bro, they were, singing along to that shit. I loved that, man. Bryan Danielson, the fact that he came out to Final Countdown, hats off to AEW. I don't give a shit if this is only a one-time thing. Great moment. Just great moment. Of course, Okada comes out. We get a bunch of holy shit chants by the crowd. And of course, as I stated earlier in the beginning, the crowd is going crazy. Both lock up. You can hear in the crowd, you're going to get your fucking head kicked in chants, which is a Bryan Danielson special. Then we get the knuckle lock applied by both. Danielson applies the Romero special. He drives his knees on Okada onto the mat. Both lock up. We get a side headlock by Okada. We then get a shoulder tackle by Okada. Then he hits a moonsault landing on his feet. Okada goes for the back elbow, but then we get a dropkick by Okada. Okada's dropkicks are fucking smooth. He sends Danielson to the barricade. We then get a boot by Okada, and then later Danielson sends him to the ring post. Danielson is back into the ring. He ends up hitting a running dropkick on Okada, and then he drives his knee onto the outside. Then we get a series of hammerlocks by Okada and on Danielson, and he sends Okada to the post once again. He sends him back into the ring, but then Danielson comes back to the top. He drives him down onto the arm of Okada. We then get a cover by Danielson and a near fall. And then he drives his knees on Okada. Danielson then goes for repeated elbow strikes. He applies the Keta mutilation. After that, we get a roll-up and a near fall. Stomp by Danielson. Then he goes for the chop and then a kick. Chops and kicks by Bryan Danielson at this point. Okada then no-sells them. He stares at Danielson. And when Okada stares at his opponent, shit's going to get real. We get a chop by Danielson. Then we get a kick to the chest of Danielson, but then Danielson goes for the boot. Okada then flapjacks Danielson. Okada then fights off Danielson, but then we get a boot by Okada. We get an elbow by Okada, but then we get the DDT by Okada after that. We get a cover by Okada and a near fall. Okada then, takes Danielson up. Danielson escapes. Danielson ends up hitting the uppercut. We then get a drop kick on Okada, taking Danielson from the top to the outside. Okada then gets sent to the barricade, but then Danielson gets sent to the crowd. Okada then goes for a flying crossbody on Danielson, but then both men are back into the ring. Okada's in control. Danielson is behind on Okada, but then Okada ends up going for the neck breaker. We then get a cover and a near fall. At this point, both men are on the top. Danielson then drives his elbows on Okada. We then get a kick by Danielson, followed by a shotgun dropkick by Danielson. Later, Danielson goes for repeated uppercuts and shots on Okada. Okada strikes back. And then we get repeated uppercuts by Danielson. Danielson then blocks Okada. Okada then picks up Danielson, and then we get an uppercut again by Bryan Danielson. Then we get a shotgun dropkick by Okada. He picks up Bryan. Bryan escapes. He hits the German suplex. Danielson then goes for a series of running kicks into the corner. And Danielson runs into a dropkick, and then he gets hit with another dropkick. Okada goes to the top, and then he misses the elbow. He ends up getting caught, but then Danielson applies the Juji Gatame. After that, Danielson wrenches the arm of Kazuchika Okada, and then he transitions into the label lock. Okada goes to the ropes, but then Danielson ends up going for a running kick onto the back of Okada. Okada's on the outside. Then Danielson tries to go for the tope, but then he gets caught by Kazuchika Okada. Danielson escapes the Rainmaker attempt, and then after that, he hits the dropkick. And then we get a kick to the chest of Okada by Danielson. Okada catches Danielson and hits a tombstone on the ramp. After that, Okada drags Danielson back into the ring. Okada goes to the top, but then he hits the elbow drop. Then the crowd is up on their feet. Rainmaker pose by Okada. Of course, the camera just pans back, kind of similar to Best Friends. Phenomenal stuff. After that, Danielson is down. Doc Samson comes in, and Danielson, this spot was really scary. Danielson is pretending he's pretending that he's having a seizure. And I literally was legitimately afraid that Danielson was actually legit suffering from something like that. But thankfully that wasn't the case. Danielson was actually, pretending that he was. And what happens is Okada comes in. And, he comes in on Danielson. And Danielson immediately runs and hits the Busaiku knee. We get a German by Okada. He ends up landing on his feet. Danielson goes for the Busaiku knee. We get a cover and a near fall. Danielson stomps his head in. But then Danielson struggles to apply the label lock. We get a roll-up by Okada, and then we get a near fall. We then get a rolling elbow by Danielson. We then get a kick to the head of Okada by Danielson. Then we get a series of yes chants by the crowd. He runs into a drop kick by Okada. Danielson gets up. Okada goes for a driver. Looked like a Michinoku driver to me, but I got to go back and watch. We get a Rainmaker by Okada, and then we get a cover and a near fall. Okada goes for a series of lariats after that. Rainmaker countered. Busaiku knee countered. Danielson catches Okada. He applies the label lock, and then he targets the left arm of Okada. And Danielson just drives his forearm onto the face of Okada. He uses his foot over the arm of Okada, drives it back, and Okada taps out. The first time Okada tapped out since, I believe, 2015. And I believe that was against Shinsuke Nakamura. Correct me if I'm wrong. Okada taps out. Danielson beats Kazuchika Okada into the center of the ring. And that was the match, the dream match everybody was talking about between Danielson and Kazuchika Okada. What are my overall thoughts of this match? This match was great. I loved it. Of course, this was very technical. I mean, Danielson is always known for his technical wrestling abilities. But overall, this was a good match. Do I prefer Will Ospreay versus Kenny Omega, closing the show? Yes, I do. But again, it probably would have ended up being in the same predicament as what we actually got with Danielson and Okada. But I will say, even though I thought this match was great, Danielson and Okada is nowhere near. If you compare it to Ospreay versus Omega, Ospreay and Omega was clearly the best match of the entire night. After that match, there was no chance that any other match would top that match. This match maybe could have had a chance, but it really, I don't want to say it fell flat on its face because that's just me being disrespectful, but it really did not fall flat on its face, but it kind of ended a little bit randomly, in my opinion. Very underwhelming stuff. But was the match good? Yeah, it was. It was good for what it was. And for the moment, especially in the beginning, that was kind of what it's all about. When it comes to all these types of dream matches, it's not really about how great the match itself was. It's really about the moments that you end up making, especially with the reactions from the crowds. If you think about it, Hogan versus Rock, WrestleMania 18. Really, a lot of people do not talk about the in-ring stuff that was going on. Everybody talked about how The Rock got a negative reaction from the crowd in Toronto and how Hogan got just a super fucking over reaction in Toronto. A very positive babyface reaction, even though Hogan was coming into the match as a heel. The reactions is really what, in my opinion, kind of made this match. But overall, was it better than Omega versus Ospreay? Absolutely not. No, it wasn't. Not to take away from Danielson and Okada, because they're both great, but that was clearly the better match than this match that we got over here. But Bryan Danielson beats Kazuchika Okada, which, in my opinion, I think was the right decision to make, because if you think about it, Danielson, whenever AEW puts Bryan Danielson in a big match, he ends up losing that match, not because they want him to lose. It's because if you look at it from a storyline perspective and the plans that they would have for all those other wrestlers that Danielson would go against, it would make sense. But it sucks that Danielson had to lose a lot of these big matches that he was involved in. But Danielson finally won a pay-per-view match, and he beat Kazuchika Okada in the center of the ring. But yeah, that was my AEW New Japan Pro Wrestling Forbidden Door review. Overall thoughts on this show, man. This show was absolutely phenomenal. Probably the best AEW pay-per-view of 2023. Keep in mind, not the best pay-per-view of 2023, because we got the rest of 2023 happening. We got, of course, Money in the Bank happening this weekend. We got All In happening in London. It's going to be a very big summer for professional wrestling. But nonetheless, this show was phenomenal. It even topped last year's Forbidden Door. Last year's Forbidden Door struggled in the build because of all the injuries, but it ended up being probably one of the best shows of all time. This show squandered last year's Forbidden Door. It really did. This show was amazing. Omega versus Ospreay. How many times do I got to say these two men just fucking murdered each other, gave us a spectacle, and gave us a match that we will never forget. And I would go as far as to say, bro, we need to get a third match. We need to get a third match between Ospreay and Omega. We need to get a fucking 2 out of 3 falls match, an Iron Man match, whatever it is. We need to get a third match. Will it happen at Wembley? I have no idea. But these two men need to run it back again. They really do. But overall, fantastic show. Easily the best AEW pay-per-view so far. And AEW, man, they're riding a wave of momentum, man. Just like, we thought AEW lost their momentum. I genuinely believe AEW snatched that momentum right back. They really did. And Forbidden Door, man, phenomenal fucking show. A+. Maybe A-. I don't know. But this show gets an A. For my standards, this show gets an A. And overall, man, just great show by AEW. And let's see what happens in the future with AEW coming towards this summer. So, yeah, that was my AEW New Japan Pro Wrestling Forbidden Door 2023 review right here on the WrestleHavoc Podcast. Please like, subscribe, comment down below, push that bell for notifications to be on the lookout for more videos right here on the WrestleHavoc Podcast, in which we discuss everything in and outside of the squared circle. My voice is shot. Make sure to like and subscribe for more content. And, as the friggin' referee would say, ring, ring, ring that damn bell for more notifications. And as always, it is Flamin' Ricky DeRays, signing out. I'll see you guys for Monday Night Raw. Peace.